Creative insurgents. Creative insurgents.
Oh, hey everybody, I'm Corey Huff.
And I'm Melissa Dinwiddie.
And I'm Minnie.
And this is the Creative Insurgents podcast.
Living a creative life according to your own rules.
Yay!
In today's episode of Creative Insurgents, Gwenn Seemel, our guest, talks about art careers without copyright law, how the internet has changed her art career, and why artists hate marketing themselves. And in the quick tip, we run down a great resource for managing your art inventory. So, Melissa, Minnie, what's going on with you guys?
Wow, well, I just got back from a great trip to Seattle, which completely inspired me and filled my creative well and got me back to creating art with, I'm knitting with my art these days. I'm bringing knitting and paper together. Yeah, I'm very excited.
Knitting and paper?
Yeah.
Cool, I have never knitted before.
Oh, well, I think you might have to try it, Corey.
I might have to. If you can see over here, I'll turn my camera a little bit. You can see a very, like a bunch of boxes and bags and stuff. I'm not moving. I'm trying an experiment, a minimalism experiment. My wife read this article about, I don't know, I think that people called the Minimalists. They have a pretty popular blog, I guess.
I know this site.
Yeah. And something that they tried was they packed up everything they owned, and then they kept it all in boxes in their place, like off to the side, and then they basically unpacked stuff as they needed to use it. And after doing that for, it was like a month, they got rid of everything that they never used.
Awesome.
So I thought that was pretty cool. So we're in a city and in a little apartment, and it's starting to get crowded. And rather than spend more money on getting a bigger place because we have so much stuff, we thought we'd try that as an experiment.
What are the first things that you've unpacked? Am I allowed to talk?
We haven't. Yeah, absolutely. Gwenn, hey Gwenn, we haven't introduced you yet. We have not finished packing yet. We just started doing this, so I'll let everybody know how it goes. So,
that's pretty brave, Corey.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I imagine the first things that I unpack will be our kitchen stuff. We probably actually won't pack.
Well, I think it's a great.
Actually go on a trip.
Yep.
It's a great idea because the best clutter busting happens when you move, right?
Yeah.
So you've created a way to effectively clutter bust without moving, but actually making it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we formally introduce Gwenn, I just want to remind everybody that they can subscribe to the Creative Insurgents podcast by going to
creativeinsurgents.com.
And there you can find all the latest episodes of the podcast, as well as the archives, as well as some great bonuses for artists who want to learn to sell more art online and who are looking for resources for freeing up their creativity and living a more creative life. Those resources are free from Melissa and I. Okay, so let's go ahead and introduce Gwenn. If reading The Abundant Artist for pretty much any amount of time, you have probably come across an interview that I did with Gwenn, or me talking about Gwenn, or me mentioning Gwenn in passing and linking to her blog. I think I went back and looked, and we've done at least 4 posts about Gwenn on The Abundant Artist, and I've mentioned her a bunch of times. I love her ideas on creativity. She's been an independent artist for more than 10 years. She just passed her 10-year anniversary, and she's just a great inspiration to other artists who are trying to make a go of it. And I'm really, really excited that she was willing to come and be a guest with us on the podcast here. So Gwenn, say hi to everybody.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you for featuring my work all the time and making me feel special. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're glad to have you here. So, Gwenn, we've talked about a number of things, and before we dive into the meat, I just want to give people an idea of how you got where you're at. So, can you give us, just a brief overview of your 10-year art career and how you got started and how you got to where you are?
Sure. So I graduated from Willamette University, which is in Salem, and I immediately moved back to Portland and moved in with my parents. And that made it so I didn't have to pay rent, didn't have to feed myself, didn't have to worry about those kinds of bills to begin with. And at the same time, my brother, who's a couple years older than me, had already been in town for a while, making sort of Seemel headway into the art world of Portland. Mm-hmm. And he got me my first few commissions in town because although he was doing theater, the people that he knew were interested in art. They really liked him, so why not give his kid sister a chance? And so that's how I kind of got started. I lived with my parents for a year and a half and built up a little bit of capital, and then didn't move out on my own, moved in with my brother and some other friends. And, you know, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily easier now. I think I still have those, you know, like starting out there were those, it was like feast or famine. Either I was doing really well or I was like, where am I going to make my rent? I don't get quite into that place of like not knowing where my rent is coming from anymore, but there is still this sort of up and down. I think that's part of being a freelancer, not having that steady paycheck, is that you need to sort of learn to ride the roller coaster. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't get easier, but the momentum that you build as you do your career is helpful, because ultimately I think to make a living as an artist, what you need is other people talking about your work, and the longer that you're doing it, the more they're going to be talking about it just because you've been doing it for so long. So mm-hmm. it gets easier in that sense.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that, Gwen. I know that a big something that you write about a lot on your blog, and you even wrote a book about it, is the way that the web has shaped your career as an artist and enabled you to sell and connect with other people. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I guess I think that fundamentally an art career has always been getting people to see your work, right? And as I mentioned, the best way to do that, I sort of touched on a little bit, was to have other people talk about your work, either your older brother or someone at the publication. And so the way that the web has changed that is that there are more voices. There are more people who can talk about your work because there are more platforms, because that's what the web has allowed for, is all of this multiplying of platforms. And that can be great. It can also be really trying because you do have more options as far as getting your work out there. There are more platforms, but at the same time, then are those platforms, do they have an actual audience? Or are they still cultivating their audience? Are you going to be a part of their cultivation, or are you going to be sort of riding what they've already figured out? So for me, the web has been great. I don't know that it's been so useful in getting paying clients for my work. I think it has, but I don't think that's been the primary thing. It's more about meeting people, making those connections, and fostering sort of my artist persona. This is something I'm really thinking about a lot right now. The character of the artist. I'm pretty shy, really, when I'm being really real, but with the web and with the videos that I do, I've learned how to talk about my work and learned to be more comfortable with that. And so it's allowed me to be more social and then to, build an audience that way. So the web has affected my career and has impacted, but still the same things going on, I think, as maybe not it's always been, but as it's been for a long time. An artist is trying to get their work seen, and to do that, you need to have other people talking about your work.
Yeah, there are various ways of communicating with people online, right? And this is a question that I get all the time: is do I blog? Do I use Facebook? Should I be on Google Plus? There are all kinds of ways of using the internet to share your art. What has worked for you, and how do you think those channels are different?
Primarily, I use Facebook and Twitter, I would say, and LinkedIn to maybe a slightly lesser degree, but my blog, I guess my blog first, then Facebook, Twitter, then LinkedIn. Google Plus is hard because for whatever reason it doesn't totally crash my browser, but it's definitely like a lot for my browser to handle. But I try to use it. Facebook is definitely more when I'm communicating with people who know me I do have a lot of friends that I don't know, haven't met personally, but it's a little bit more personal, I feel like. Twitter there's a lot going on in the stream, the Twitter stream, the ultimate stream, and so to be heard it's just a different approach. I think I tweet a lot more than I put on Facebook just because you are trying to be a part of that stream. But I really enjoy how on Twitter you do have a lot of different conversations going on, and it is going very quickly, and so you can join in with that and learn new things. LinkedIn has the feature of asking questions to other people in various groups, and I've gotten into a lot of conversations about copyright there, actually, that have informed how I approach talking to artists about copyright, because I've gotten into a lot of heated discussions on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. So that's how I tend to use LinkedIn, as more like a research kind of a thing. So yeah.
So Gwen, I'm really curious, do you have a strategy for when you use your social media platforms, how you approach them? Do you, for example, say, I'm going to post once a day on Facebook, and I'm going to pre-schedule them all on Sunday, or I'm going to log in every day at noon and post on Facebook? What is your strategy for each of these different platforms?
I'm not really a routine kind of person, so if I'm feeling inspired, I'll post a lot. I don't pre-schedule, just because for me, when I try to respond to someone who's obviously pre-scheduled something, it's always kind of a bummer, so I don't want to be that person. It's just a personal choice. That does mean that I don't have a super consistent presence if I'm on vacation, for example, and that's just something that I figure is okay. Maybe it's not, I don't know, but it works for me. On Facebook, what I've noticed is that for whatever reason, I don't understand how Facebook uses its algorithms or whatever, but I've noticed that I can't just post links or post photos or post videos. They really do feature the statuses, the simple like text statuses more. And so I try to do a lot of that. That's also a way that I do research, and it's a much more friendly atmosphere than on LinkedIn. It's not as much posturing, I feel like, as there is on LinkedIn, where people are trying to be experts. So on Facebook, it's fun to ask those questions like, do you ever doubt yourself as an artist, and sort of get into these conversations that I maybe would have more if I was living closer to these people whose work I enjoy, and so that sort of a thing.
Thank you for that.
I didn't even know you could pre-schedule a whole week.
So, Melissa, I know you and I have talked about this quite a bit. Gwen, how do you keep up the mindset of being a successful artist? I know that's like a crazy, huge question, but I think it's really key, and something that you, I think, have done quite well is you talked about, I used to worry about where my rent comes from. Now you don't worry about that so much. You worry about other stuff. But I think there's a mindset to being a successful creative. What do you think about that?
I think there's a couple different levels of that. For me, because I'm 10 years in, because I have a chronic illness, I don't think I could do anything else. I don't think my resume would be very interesting to anyone else. So there's a certain amount of that momentum that actually helps you stick with it, because you're locked in anyway. And with my chronic illness, I can't work on anyone else's schedule anyway, so I better make it work. But there's also like self-care stuff, like making sure that if you're not in a space where you're enjoying sharing what you're doing, there's really two options, right? You can force yourself, and that may be good. That may get you into the place where you're enjoying it again, or it may be bad, where you're not sharing it's not passionate, and so no one's really responding to it. Or you can take a step back, and I think that I have like a weekly cycle of taking a step back. Like, I only share when I'm feeling it. I don't. If I'm feeling a little too sensitive, I think that artists in general tend to be sensitive, and that's part of why we make art, is because we see things about the world that we want to share with our sensitivity. We see these things, but that also means that sometimes other people are scary or too much, and so taking that time away and stepping back from from the great thing that is being social is important as well. So I recommend that for sure.
I'm sorry you're sick.
Thanks.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm of two minds about that as well. I feel like it's actually helped me to be a better person. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I'm working through it and it's working out. So.
So Gwen, I know that with your recent series, the name escapes me.
Crime Against Nature?
Yes, thank you. Crime Against Nature. You've had some pretty neat exposure in areas where artists generally don't get a lot of attention, like scientific magazines and stuff like that. How did that?
Well, mostly it's a lot of just hitting up the right people and hitting them up again and again, not being afraid that they're not answering. I think some of it has to do with the fact that the book that I created as part of that work has an evolutionary biologist who's well respected in her field. She did the foreword for it, so that sort of puts the stamp of scientific approval on the work to some degree. She's also very controversial, so for some people that's a negative, but I think that that's part of it as well. And I got her to participate in the project in part because the project before that I had an art historian write about the work that I was doing with another artist, Becca Bernstein, and he did the introduction for that book. And so I think that these things sort of build on each other. And so I think that that's how I got the science interest. I really firmly believe that art shouldn't be about art. It's fun to do that sometimes, and I do it sometimes. But in the end, I don't think that that's the most interesting kind of communication. I think that I wish that artists were more drawn to larger conversations as opposed to just art about art.
Oh my gosh. So when I was in theater school, I had a professor who said that actors don't become interesting until they're at least 30. Because anybody younger than that hasn't lived enough and hasn't had enough life experience outside of the theater to bring that outside experience into their art.
Do you think that's true? I mean, have you found that to be true in your own life?
I think I'm a better actor now than I was when I was in art school. I think I bring a range of other experiences and emotions. I remember when I was in college, like I was the only person interested in medieval literature out of all of my classmates.
You nerd.
But but I was also interested in finance and business books as well, which probably was a good foreshadow for what I'm doing now. But I think that those tangential interests inform your art and make you a deeper and better artist. Yeah, I do think that.
When I look back at the work that I made in my 20s, I try not to apologize for it because I try not to apologize for any of my work, but there are aspects that I feel a little bit silly about, or it's not that. It's more like, oh, I was so cute then, like that this was what I was focused on. And so it really makes me love actually those years of the 20s, but I do think that my work is getting more interesting as I get older as well. So
yeah.
So
Gwen, you mentioned earlier, you had a biologist write the foreword to your current book, and you had an art historian write the foreword to the previous one, and you've made connections with some really interesting people from all different walks of life. Like I know you and I have talked about your relationship with Cory Doctorow and other online sort of celebrities. How has that informed what you do?
It goes back to that getting other people to talk about what you're doing and getting the weight of everything that they are as people behind what you're doing. So it's very useful marketing-wise. I think maybe part of my focus on that actually comes from portraiture, because when I build a series that is portraits, I am accessing like 10 people's lives and putting them on display, but also honoring them and saying like these people's experiences is interesting. And so I think I maybe have that focus from there. The way that I don't know Cory. I've met Cory Doctorow then once in person.
Wait, isn't it a Cory?
Yeah. And but the way that I know him and sort of my connection to him is through someone who walked into a gallery that I happened to be showing in. And I think that it's so important to be just open to whoever talks to you. And the guy who walked in, I won't give his name, but he's a very eccentric fellow. He's just a little bit strange. And there were moments in our first conversation where I was like a little bit not quite sure how to take him. And then over the years, our relationship progressed, and he's the one who knows Cory better. And so that's how that evolved. So to be open to anyone who wants to talk to you about your work, you never know who it is. This might be someone who's really well connected and could help promote your work. Or they may just be someone, also equally as valuable, who just has great insight about your work, or an insight anyway. It's so important for artists to be listening to how people are responding to their work, because ostensibly your work is communication. You are talking to the world with your work, and so you should want to hear what the world has to say back.
The other thing that I would add to that is I had in my music life, I had a mentor who always liked to say, you never know who that person sitting next to you on the bus is going to become.
Right.
Regardless of who they are right now, they could be the janitor right now, but maybe they're the janitor at some, awesome music promotion company or whatever, and 5 years from now, they may have some amazing opportunity available for you. So if you treat everybody as somebody of interest and value, you just never know what might come out of it, right?
It's also just the right way to be,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, awesome. This is so interesting. The way that relationships change who we are and change the trajectory of our careers. Yeah. So Gwenn, how do you think the web, social media, blogging, and all of that is changing the art business in general, right? Like we talked a little bit about what you do and how it has exposed your art to a broader audience, but how do you think that's changing the life, the business of being a creative?
I think it's requiring artists to be more able to market their work, and so if that's the case, then maybe we should try and like it a little bit better. I think about it in terms of doing the dishes. Like when you're living with a bunch of roommates, often like a source of conflict is who's going to do the dishes, right? And so early on I decided I'm going to be the one that does the dishes, because then we don't have all the fights and it's just taken care of. And then as I started to do the dishes, I realized I kind of liked it. I kind of liked this sort of meditative moment of running my hands under, warm water. Like I found things that I enjoyed about it, even though dishes, given, not a fun thing really. And I feel like the same could be said of marketing. If you can figure out how, instead of making it something separate from your art, something that you don't like, think about it like, oh, it's also communication. My art is communication. I'm trying to express something to the world. Marketing is the same thing. So how can I turn it into an art? How can I access the joy of marketing? It must exist for each person, but how to actually find that is key.
Yeah. Have you read the $12 million stuffed shark?
No. I'm going to write that down.
Okay. So I just barely, I'm about halfway through it right now, and it's so interesting. So Damien Hirst, everybody in the art world knows who that guy is.
Oh, yeah.
A few years ago, he had a shark mounted and stuffed. Like an actual dead shark.
Oh, yeah, I've seen it. It's suspended in a tank.
Oh, you have? Okay, yeah.
I have seen it.
Yeah, so it was sold for $12 million.
It's scary. Why would anybody want to buy it?
And the book, the $12 million stuffed shark, is about how, not only about how that piece of art was sold, but also about the art world and how huge sales like that happen.
Fascinating.
Yes. And I feel very comfortable saying that Damien Hirst and Andy Warhol and other artists that are known for selling their work for lots of money, especially in contemporary, like from Andy Warhol's time to now, artists are becoming very savvy in the art marketing world, and they're partnering with savvy galleries and savvy collectors to create a creative experience around the marketing of their art, not just the art itself.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all a game. It can be a really fun game, though.
It is a game, and it can be fun. If you're, if you are, there's a big difference between hoping that you can sell your art and to make your rent, and hoping you can sell your art for $12 million, even though you don't necessarily need the money.
I had a book arts teacher who always said that marketing was your most creative act as an artist. And I thought that was a really great tagline to keep in mind.
I might make that
what
my
if-
website tagline.
Minnie, yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
I always think when people say, "Oh yeah, marketing, it's necessary and you can learn to love it and great," but what if I'm not good at it? Like, I'm good with pictures, but not with words necessarily.
How did you get good at How did you get good with pictures?
I don't know. It's natural. I don't know.
You're talking right now, and you
Yeah.
seem to be able to talk. So you don't not understand words. You just maybe don't like written words. Is that part of it?
Yeah, I don't write super well.
That's why video and how video is so pervasive on the web now is useful to someone like you. Instead of having to, slog through writing something, you can make a video about it.
Oh yeah.
And literally, like in many instances, creating a video is easier than writing a blog post.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Usually takes me a lot less time.
Yeah. Now, creating a good video and having editing skills and all of that, we'll see. But hey, it's all different skills.
And it's all learnable.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is.
Thank you.
So Gwen, I can't ever have a conversation with you without asking you where you stand on copyright issues.
Well,
Sort of out of left field from what we've been talking about, but I feel like I get emails from artists at least a couple times a week asking me how to stop people from stealing their art online.
really?
Yes, I get emails all the time.
Are these people who have had something stolen, or they're worried about it happening?
Some of them have had something stolen, but 90% of them have never had anything stolen, and they're afraid to market their work online because they are afraid that somebody will steal their art. And I tell them, some of the technical things, like if you make your image resolution 72 DPI, then it's really hard for anybody to steal it and print anything on it because it won't look good. And there are things you can do to lock down your images, but I don't recommend that. But you have a different take and a different mindset on it, and I'd love for you to share that.
Well, I was going to say, sort of my new approach, and maybe this isn't true according to your experience, but I was going to say that the people who tend to really care about copyright are either the people who are really for it or really against it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to convert anyone who's really for it. This is my new thing. Instead, I'm going for the people who are sort of ambivalent about it. They maybe like slap the copyright C just because, why not? They slap it on their work. But maybe that's not true. So I feel like there's this paradigm that I was raised in as well, where art and ideas, whatever, all of that's intellectual property, so it's something that we can own, right? And so when someone takes it from us, this thing that we've made, it feels like a violation. I have been there. That has happened to me, and I have felt those emotions, and they weren't pleasant, and through a variety of things happened that eventually converted me to a different way of thinking, allowed me to see art as not property. One of those things being seeing the documentary RIP, a Remix Manifesto. It's an excellent documentary. It's a quick, hour and a half or something, where you learn a lot about the dangers of copyright to
What's
creativity.
it called? Riff?
RIP, a Remix Manifesto.
Oh, okay.
Rip a remix manifesto. We'll make sure we'll have show notes when the video goes live. We'll make sure to put up a link to the stuff we discuss in the podcast.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And another thing is the book by Lawrence Lessig. He's the inventor of or one of the instigators, I guess, maybe, I'm not sure about his whole thing, behind Creative Commons, which is the deconstruction of the copyright permissions. So when you copyright a work, you're not just saying, don't steal this. You're actually saying, you have to ask me permission when you want to do anything with it. You're saying, I want you to credit me, and you can't reuse it commercially, and don't make any derivative work. So don't remix it, don't alter it, don't do any of that. So that's several rights. There may be other ones. I'm not sure if I get them all. But anyway, there's several things that are wrapped into copyright. And what Creative Commons does is allows you to pick those apart and decide, well, I don't want people to use my stuff commercially, but I don't mind if they remix it. Or I don't mind if they remix it, but I would like them to give me credit for, you know, the work that I've done. And so I find it as a good starting point. I want to go to a world where there is no copyright, but anyway, Creative Commons is a good starting point where we can start to deconstruct what rights we actually want and need even. And so ultimately, the people that I'm trying to talk to about copyright aren't the people who've had a really bad experience with someone taking their work and who've had that paradigm reinforced, that paradigm of art as property reinforced to the point where they're just rabid about it. I know that I can't access those people for the most part. They've just been so filled with anger about this violation of being stolen from. And I'm sorry that they feel that way. I feel bad for them. It's not a fun place to be. I don't think I can help them. But there are a lot of artists who just haven't thought about it. They maybe don't have a really strong opinion about it. Maybe they're just afraid, just sort of like preemptively afraid. And I feel like conversations with them can maybe help them to get out of this paradigm of art as property, as something to be owned, and instead think of the art as connection, as a way to relate with an audience, and then to make money through that relationship. Because fundamentally that's what's going on. Copyright is supposed to be about you control all uses of your work so that you can make all the monies off of your work, because your work is property. But if you view art as connection instead, you don't actually make money on the connections themselves. You make money through them. So through private patronage, someone's like, oh, I see what you did there. I want to buy that piece, or I want to commission you, or I want to work with you in some way, or through public patronage, like grants, you know, community saying, yes, we want to support this work. So really building an audience, and then through that audience making your living, instead of thinking of selling the actual work or even the property of the work, so an image of the work, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're not saying don't put a copyright on the work. You're saying do that. Yeah?
Nope. I'm saying I wouldn't put a copyright on the work. I feel like copyright is what it essentially does is interrupt the creative process. Because how do we create? How do you create something? You're usually looking at the world around you and being inspired by it. And so you're remixing what has already come before. And for example, like if I just made a painting, if I went to a planet, where there were people, but no one had ever painted anything, no one had ever put pigment on a support and made it look like something, I would show the painting to people, and people wouldn't even see the painting, my expression, as my expression. They would be so wrapped up in the fact that I smeared colorful stuff on a piece of something, and it looks like something. They wouldn't be able to actually see the work and value the work as art. There needs to be that context of painting as something that we do, and then when you make a painting, your painting can be something valued for what it is instead of valued as like, whoa, that's an innovation that we'd never thought of. So we all need that context around our work for our work to mean anything. And so once we make a work, it becomes a part of that context for the future pieces. But copyright cuts that off. Says you can't make any derivative works, you need to be careful when you refer to this work, you could be sued, all kinds of stuff that's really scary and ultimately makes artists go and want to do something else. They're going to turn away from the work that's copyrighted if they have any sense and are going to go and look for something else. And that's too bad. That's not what copyright was intended for to begin with. It was intended to, well, supposedly, to stimulate creativity. And it was for a term of 14 years. So you had control over your work for 14 years after you created it, and in that time you were going to be able to recoup whatever investment you made when you were making that work. Now that term is more like 100 plus years. I think it's like the life of the artist plus 70 years.
99 years, yeah.
So that comes out to about 100 years in most cases, and there's no reason for us to believe that that's actually going to stop, because every time some big media corporations copyright on some piece of property that I won't even name, but is a mouse, comes up, that company goes to Congress and says, we want the copyright term to be extended. And Congress has never said no to them. So we have no reason to believe that they're going to start saying no now. So you could actually view copyright as something that is in perpetuity at this point. And is that what we want? We need to really sit down as a society and think, is that really what we want?
Yeah, I have a question. So how does your philosophy around copyright, which I understand and makes a lot of sense to me, how does that impact how you handle, say, a web image of a painting that you've made? Do you put your name on that image? Because you want to build a community, right? You want to build an audience of people who are exposed to your work. If they don't see your name on that work and have some way to connect back to you later, then it hasn't helped you to have that work out on the web, right? So how do you personally deal with that? And I understand you probably don't put the C with the circle around it on your work, but what do you do?
I don't try to do anything at this point, and at this point technology is helping that to be a better and better argument. Now you can, I don't know exactly how it works, but through Google you can search for images. So if people really wanted to trace it back to me, they probably could now. But I'm not really concerned about that. If someone sees my work once and they enjoy it, they're probably not going to care who made it anyway. Maybe they're immediately so jazzed by it that they're like, I must see more of this. That's possible, right? And maybe they'll make that extra effort. But for the most part, people, like, I don't know if you've found this the case, but sometimes you're having these conversations, let's just go back to LinkedIn, because that seems to be where it happens a lot, where you're actually talking about each other's art, but it seems like some people aren't even actually looking at other people's sites. So they're actually like talking with an artist and talking at them about their work, but they haven't actually taken the time to go and look at it. And so to worry about whether or not someone who sees my work on the web is going to trace it back to me is sort of, I just feel like it's not something to worry about until someone is so interested in my work, and at that point they're going to see that I've built a whole other world, on my website. It's not just my paintings. They can also enjoy my videos, and so then they'll be drawn in more, and at that point they may become, a fan. But until then, they're just someone who's seen one of my pieces. That's it. It doesn't matter that they don't know who I am.
Yeah. Which is another argument for having a website and having a presence online and on the various social networks, so that when somebody decides that they want to track you down, they can.
Yeah, you have a home that they can come to. Yeah.
Yep. Which is a whole other discussion that we probably don't have time for. But I'm a big advocate of artists taking ownership of their own career and their presence on the web, and there's something very empowering about that.
I did want to say one more thing if we have time, Corey.
Yeah.
Do we have time?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was approached, I can't name them yet. I will name them when the ads finally appear. I was approached by a company that it's a household name, by their advertising agency. And they wanted to use one of my pieces collaged and remixed and stuff, but they wanted to be able to use one of my images on their advertising campaign. And
wow, congratulations!
Thank you, it's exciting. And the point is that they came to me and they asked for it instead of just having one of the many artists they have on staff reproduce what I'd made. For them it actually makes more sense. Even if someone has all over their website, I don't copyright my work, they still came to me and asked. And the reason why they were asking, well, maybe not the reason, but why they would have to ask me is what you brought up earlier, Corey. They wanted this image, they liked this image, but it was 72 dpi. They couldn't, blow it up huge on their posters, which is what they wanted to be able to do. So they were coming to me to have access to the larger file. And nowhere in our contracts does it even refer to copyright. It refers to licensing of the work, use of the work. And ultimately, I feel good about accepting money for that because I did have to go through my files, do a scan of I'd taken a picture on film of this work, so I did have to do that work, so I felt good about it. But I think most corporations are not looking to screw over artists. It is easier to just hand artists, $1,000 and get the use of their work than it is to have to worry about that artist having a problem with you. So this concern with corporations stealing from you, I think is true sometimes, and I've definitely seen cases of it, but it's not true across the board. A lot of companies are not interested in screwing over artists.
Yeah.
So, just putting that out
absolutely,
there.
And I think that is becoming more true as companies realize that if they steal from an artist and that artist happens to have any significant social media presence, that becomes the PR nightmare costs more than it would have cost to license it from the artist in the first place.
Right.
Yay for Twitter!
Yeah.
So as we're wrapping up, you've put all of this stuff that we're talking about into a book. Tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, to celebrate my 10 years as an artist, I wrote a book about the marketing of art as I see it. It's meant sort of less as like a how-to, step-by-step. These are the, this is the e-commerce site that I use. This is the content management service I use. I don't talk about that stuff. What I talk about is essentially how to find the joy in marketing and understanding what marketing is. It's not just like you yapping about your stuff to no one. It's trying to create a context around your work that is celebratory, that is interesting to people, and how to enjoy doing that as you're working on it. So that's what the book is about. Absolutely.
Well, and how would somebody get a hold of a copy of your book?
You can go to gwenseemel.com/artmarketing. It's also everywhere on my site. I think you would have a hard time missing it if you went to my site.
Cool.
And you can read it for free online.
Nice.
Awesome.
We'll definitely put a link up to your book in the show notes.
Cool.
Cool. Well, Gwenn, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us today and share your thoughts on art marketing. And hopefully everybody else who watched this will get as much out of it as I did.
Thank you, Corey. It's so much fun. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwenn.
Thanks, everybody. And now we'll head into the quick tip segment. Gwenn, you can stick around or you can take off. It's up
I'm
to
going
you.
to stick around, but I'm going to plug in my computer. I'm here.
Yep. Today's quick tip section, we want to talk about a little problem that a lot of artists have, which is managing inventory. A lot of artists say after you have a career for a few years, you have dozens, if not hundreds, of pieces of art. And some of those pieces can be in shows, some of them might be at a gallery somewhere. You might have sold some originals and have them hanging in people's houses. You might have a storage unit full of art that you haven't sold yet. How do you figure out where those pieces are, and how do you track it all? And I've seen a lot of different solutions from a lot of different artists, everything from Excel spreadsheets to a handwritten notes. But it becomes very, very difficult. And also, how do you share that with other people? So I ran, a couple of years ago, I ran across these guys who, one guy was a software developer, and his mother was an artist, and she was having this problem with tracking her art, and he created a system for her called Artwork Archive. And Artwork Archive is a web-based inventory management system for artists, where you can add digital copies, digital images of all your art. You can add notes on where all those pieces are, what part of the world they're in, who you sold them to, and how much you sold them for. Pretty much everything you need to know about your art inventory, and have it all managed in one place on the web, so it's accessible from anywhere. And you can organize it into collections, so that you can share those collections with specific people. So if you wanted to share a collection with a gallery owner, you can do that. If you want to share a collection with a specific collector, you can do that. And there's a whole bunch of other features. There's a free version of Artwork Archive, as well as a paid version that gives you access to a whole bunch of additional features and contact management and backups of all your data. It's a really great website. I highly recommend it for any artist who needs to manage their inventory.
Oh, Corey?
Yeah.
How many do I have to have before I don't qualify for the free version?
You can have up to 10 pieces in the free version.
Oh,
the free version,
that's not very much.
No, it's not. But the free version is mostly there so you can get an idea of how it works. But it's not very expensive. It's $39 a year to have up to 100 pieces, and then they have other plans. So it's a great way to organize your art, and obviously there are many alternatives, but the guys at Artwork Archive are, the great thing about it is in the 2 years that I've known them, they've added a ton of new features and done a ton of really interesting upgrades to the site. So I'm excited to see where they go, and excited to see what artists and our listeners think of it. So that's our show for today. Thanks so much for listening and tuning in, and please subscribe to the podcast and to our newsletter. And thanks again to Gwen and Melissa and Minnie for being with us today.
Thanks, Corey.
Oh yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.